For years, there have been conspiracy theories about how Adolf Hitler actually died. Some thought he had fled and gone into exile. Others thought he had staged his own death. But now there is new proof, and the truth is much darker than theory. He did not escape, as some had imagined. What actually took place is sad, grim, and alters our perception of the last chapter in his tale. It is amazing how silently some of history's most vociferous figures fade. Adolf Hitler, whose words once roused nations and whose war raged across continents, lived out his last days not on the battlefields or in a trial court, but deep below in a dark, concrete bunker beneath the rubble of Berlin. Behind the thick steel doors and bulwarked walls, the man who had once insisted on absolute mastery over a continent had been brought low to something wretchedly human, isolated, prematurely aged, and encircled by only a dwindling ring of faithful aides. By April 1945, it was lost. The city was collapsing. The rumble of Soviet cannon fire grew closer and closer, shaking the city as if a clock were ticking. Within the Führerbunker, the clock was ticking. Days before the end, something odd occurred. Hitler wedded Eva Braun, his longtime lover. It was performed in the wee hours of April 29, 1945. It was brief, civil, and starkly plain, no flowers, no music, just a few witnesses and a feeling of finality. The following day, April 30th, they were both gone. A private room was said to be where the couple withdrew, according to witnesses. A shot rang out moments later. Some of them claimed Eva had cyanide while Hitler shot himself, others told somewhat different stories. But all of them agreed on one thing: their lifeless bodies were next to each other. Hitler had ordered his staff to cremate the bodies at once in the garden of the Chancellery. In the turmoil of a besieged city, with Soviet troops advancing, a rushed cremation was attempted under fire. The ashes were buried in a shallow crater. Soviet soldiers arrived hours later to see only charred remains. The Soviet Union said that they had recovered Hitler's body, but they never gave the world conclusive evidence. They even changed their own story over time. Stalin even informed Western leaders that he thought Hitler had escaped. There was no body, no public photos, and no reliance on witnesses who stood to gain by concealing or distorting Hitler's legacy that sowed seeds of doubt, not by conspiracy theorists but by subsequent silence and secrecy. What started as a simple tale of suicide in a bunker grew more complex. The truth varied according to whom it was narrated. While the world was focused on Hitler, there were not many who asked what happened to his surviving relatives. He had no publicly recognized children, but he did have relatives. One of them was William Patrick Hitler, his nephew born in England. William traveled to Germany in the 1930s with hopes his uncle would assist him with finding a career. The relation turned bad, and when war erupted, William relocated to the United States, enlisted in the U.S. Navy, and fought against Nazi Germany. After the war, he lived quietly in New York under a new name, raising a family and avoiding attention. Other relatives took even greater measures to distance themselves. Some changed their names, vanished from public records, or swore never to have children, determined to end the family line entirely. History tends to haunt not in ghosts, but in unspoken tales. Hitler's last days are replete with such shadows: loyalty, fear, silence, survival. His family dissolved into mundane life, and the rest of the world speculated on what actually transpired when the bunker door closed for the final time. Whether Hitler perished that day in 1945 or not, the mystery has influenced decades of speculation. In history, a clear ending enables people to move on. But if evidence is lacking and questions remain, the story will not end. That is precisely what happened to Hitler. Although official records stated that he suicided, another theory persisted quietly: that he fled. To some, the notion was unbelievable. But others said it was logical. A man who directed one of the most productive wartime efforts in history suddenly disappeared, leaving behind only a handful of dubious eyewitness accounts and unsubstantiated remains. The Soviet Union, which purported to possess his corpse, refused to produce unequivocal evidence to the West. With the escalation of the Cold War, rumors grew stronger. The greatest speculation had Hitler hiding in Argentina. President Juan Perón had taken in numerous former Nazis, such as Adolf Eichmann and Joseph Mengele, who lived in comfort there until they were finally found. Rumors cropped up about a remote German colony in Patagonia, where there were Alpine-style homes, German-sounding names, and blonde-haired inhabitants. Some reported spotting an older man with a trimmed mustache, attended by German-speaking escorts. The fullest account was in Grey Wolf, The Escape of Adolf Hitler by Simon Dunstan and Gerard Williams. Based on declassified intelligence reports, witness testimonies, and suspicious travel documents, they believed Hitler survived in Argentina through the 1960s, had children with Eva Braun, and passed away there in advanced age. Part of the reason this theory of escape long persisted is that Nazi escape routes, or Rattlins, actually existed. After Berlin fell, many top Nazi leaders disappeared, resurfacing much later in South America with new identities. They had been assisted by friendly clergy, forged Red Cross documents, and a hidden network of former SS associates. The so-called Odessa, Organisation der ehemaligen SS Einheiten, was reportedly specializing in resettling former SS officers overseas. While its organization is disputed among historians, its effects were certain. Scores of Nazis escaped punishment for decades. Some accounts even situated Hitler in Antarctica, where he was associated with a pre-war German expedition to Neuschwabenland. Other conspiracy theories had secret Nazi bases constructed under the ice and that Hitler fled there via submarine. The 1946 U.S. Navy expedition called Operation High Jump, sending thousands of soldiers and warships to Antarctica as a cover for research, only added to such rumors, though no proof was ever found. For years, it was thought that the Soviet Union had kept at least a portion of Hitler's remains, a piece of skull, teeth, and perhaps bits of bone. These remains never were completely disclosed to the public, but fragments of the tale emerged over time. The Soviets said they had uncovered a charred jawbone and section of a skull in the Chancellery Garden, evidence that Hitler had perished just as the official story had related. But there was one serious issue: nobody other than the Soviet Union was permitted to verify it. For over 60 years, the world only had their account. No third-party lab tested the remains, and no photos were published until decades afterward. Russia exhibited a small skull fragment in 2000 for the first time. It had a bullet hole and was claimed to have been discovered in Berlin where Hitler had perished. And then in 2009, this all changed. An American research team headed by Connecticut archaeologist Nick Bellantoni was cleared to test the skull. DNA testing unraveled a surprising fact: the skull was not Hitler's at all. It was that of a woman who was less than 40 years old. The find posed gigantic questions. If the Soviets had been parading this skull as evidence for decades, whose skull was it? Had it possibly belonged to Eva Braun? Or to someone else altogether? The Russians claimed the more significant piece, the jaw fragment, was still solid evidence. They asserted that it had been matched with Hitler's dental charts by Soviet physicians in 1945, but again, the world had to believe them. A second complication was the rushed cremation. Otto Gunsch, Hitler's adjutant, has testified that multiple cans of petrol were employed to cremate the corpses in the garden. Experts have contended that such a blaze, during wartime conditions, would not have been able to incinerate two corpses fully. If remains should have been readily recoverable, why are there few pieces of bone? Were these even the actual bodies? The uncertainty of the evidence only made the mystery more profound. Throwing yet another curve is the long-standing rumor that Hitler employed body doubles, men who looked enough like him to serve as decoys. Other leaders around the world, Stalin and Saddam Hussein among them, also allegedly employed this tactic. Did Hitler have a double in store for his last days? Certain reports from the disorganized tailspin in Berlin suggest discrepancies. One of the guards reported that the body appeared slightly different from the man he had known as Hitler. Another reported variations in the way Eva Braun dressed and looked. Although eyewitness memory during crisis periods is questionable, these observations have emboldened the speculation that another person might have perished in Hitler's stead for the true man to make a getaway. One has survived better, however, the jawbone. Held in Russian archives, it has been subjected to repeat analysis. Both in the initial 1945 inquiry and subsequent studies, both teeth and dental bridges correlated with Hitler's established records. A French research team conducted another test in 2017. Their results reaffirmed the correlation, remarking upon the lack of meat fibers between the teeth, reflective of Hitler's vegetarian diet, and corroborating the substandard dental work documented in his medical history. Nevertheless, the same issue persists: all of this evidence is Russian-controlled. The chain of custody is unclear, independent access is virtually non-existent, and current DNA comparisons have never been released. Science would probably resolve the argument, but without cooperation, it cannot proceed. For decades, vast collections of documents related to Nazi Germany, World War II, and its aftermath sat sealed in government archives. In recent years, many have been released under the Freedom of Information Act. Among them are FBI and CIA files, some dated into the 1950s, containing reports of alleged Hitler sightings in Argentina, Brazil, and elsewhere in South America. These reports are not conclusive evidence. Most are nothing more than hearsay tips, relayed by second-hand informants or witnesses. Most were never thoroughly investigated. Yet the fact that U.S. intelligence gathered and saved them is evidence in itself that they were at least plausible. Modern technology has breathed new life into the mystery. Facial recognition software has been applied unofficially to match pictures of Hitler with those of unknown men in South America post-war. As much as results are inconclusive, some matches have been near enough to fuel further rumors. Genetic genealogy, the same technology that has solved murders decades later, might match DNA from Hitler's known descendants against remains that are stored in Russian archives. Again, however, access is the largest hurdle. Russia holds the fragments of bone and jaw that are claimed to be Hitler's, and they have permitted only limited, closely controlled research. In the meantime, amateur researchers, historians, and internet detectives keep on digging. AI currently searches through declassified files, scans retired film reels, and restudies eyewitness accounts previously discredited. Websites are dedicated to hosting thousands of pages of post-World War II intelligence files. Some researchers follow retired flight logs, submarine logs, and border crossings, piecing together evacuation plots that reach from Europe to the Southern Hemisphere. It would also cast doubt on other post-war events. Were intelligence agencies complicit? Did governments bury the truth to avoid scandal? Could a man like Hitler vanish in plain sight without being caught? This is why the tale won't let go. Not merely a retelling of what occurred in April 1945, but about how we confront indeterminate conclusions. Without body, without trial, without incontestable evidence, history is robbed of some of its substance. And when that history is Adolf Hitler's, the uncertainty echoes across generations. Technically, the case is now closed. Hitler died in his bunker on April 30, 1945. But the evidentiary holes, the contradictory stories, and the decades of silence guarantee that for many the tale remains wide open.